The city was alive in a way only it could be after midnight, neon lights flickering, distant sirens echoing, and the faint hum of late-night traffic lingering in the air. The last train of the night rolled through the underground station, its metallic body gleaming beneath the dim lights. Inside, the carriage was nearly empty, save for a handful of passengers lost in their own weariness, their faces etched with exhaustion, stories untold. Among them sat a young woman, her head resting gently against the cold glass window, a pink dress soft against her skin, and her hair falling in delicate waves across her face. She looked like a character out of a forgotten poem, beautiful in a quiet, unassuming way. The kind of beauty that didn't demand attention but captured it effortlessly. She was asleep, unaware of the world around her, of the miles the train sped through, of the people who might be watching. And someone was watching. Ethan sat 2 seats away, his backpack crumpled against his side, a hoodie pulled over his head. It had been another brutal day, clocking out from his second job, his bones aching, his mind numb. He wasn't in the mood for anything but the soothing promise of his small, cluttered apartment and maybe a hot shower. But something about her made him look twice. It wasn't attraction, though there was no denying she was beautiful. It was something else, a sense of vulnerability, of loneliness that mirrored his own. There was a kind of quiet sadness about her even in sleep, the kind you recognized only when you'd felt it yourself. And in the eerie silence of that nearly empty train, Ethan's protective instinct, long buried under years of disappointment and struggle, stirred awake. He noticed them too. 2 men at the other end of the carriage, poorly disguised behind casual smirks and low conversations. The way their eyes lingered on the girl made Ethan's stomach clench. He knew their type, grew up around them, men who mistook vulnerability for opportunity. The taller one nudged the other, gesturing with a tilt of his chin towards her. They laughed, a sound far too cold for the warm summer night. Ethan's pulse quickened. His first instinct was to look away, to mind his own business. That was how the world worked now, wasn't it? People turned a blind eye, pretended not to see. It was safer that way. Easier. But something about the way she slept, so trusting, so oblivious to the danger creeping in, made it impossible for him to stay seated. The train rattled over the tracks, the lights overhead flickering for a brief, unsettling moment. As the men began moving closer, pretending to check their phones, Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew what would happen if nobody stepped in. And he knew he would hate himself if he let it. He stood up. "Hey," he called out, his voice rough, cutting through the stillness. The taller man turned, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "You talking to us, pal?" Ethan nodded, forcing his legs to carry him forward. He slid into the seat next to the sleeping girl, placing himself squarely between her and them. "Yeah, she's with me." It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the 2 men hesitate. They exchanged a look, gauging whether the risk was worth it. Maybe it was Ethan's tone, or the hardness in his eyes honed from years of fighting battles nobody ever saw, but after a long, tense moment, they grumbled and moved back down the carriage. Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to the girl, still asleep, her face serene in spite of what had nearly happened. Gently, he reached out and gave her shoulder a light shake. "Hey, miss, you okay?" She stirred, eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes were soft brown, a little glassy from sleep. She blinked up at him. Confused, her lips parting in a hesitant question. I must have fallen asleep," she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan said, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "It's late. Do you know where you are?" She glanced around, panic quickly replacing sleepiness. "Oh my God, my stop. How many did I miss?" "Not sure," Ethan admitted. "Where were you heading?" "Birch Street. Near the old park." Ethan frowned. He knew the area. Not a great neighborhood after dark, especially not for someone alone and barely awake. "I can walk you home," he offered. "If you want." She hesitated, caution flickering in her eyes. It was a reasonable reaction. The world wasn't kind to women who trusted easily. But there was something in Ethan's face, a mixture of sincerity, weariness, and quiet kindness, that made her nod. "I'm Lily," she said softly. "Ethan." The train pulled into the next station, and they stepped out together into the cool night air. The streets were empty, the city's pulse slower here. Streetlights cast long shadows, the occasional flicker of a bulb adding to the eerie quiet. As they walked, conversation unfolded between them in hesitant, then easier steps. Lily spoke of her job at a bookstore downtown, her love of old novels and pressed flowers. She'd fallen asleep on the train more times than she cared to admit, but tonight had been different. She admitted how exhausted she was lately, working 2 jobs, balancing night classes at the community college, trying to keep a roof over her head since her mother fell ill last winter. Ethan shared pieces of himself too, surprised by how easily the words came. About the factory job, the lost scholarship, the little brother he hadn't seen in years. About the loneliness that felt heavier some nights than others. There was something comforting about confiding in a stranger, no expectations, no history to burden the moment. When they finally reached her apartment building, a modest old structure with paint peeling from the walls and a mailbox stuffed with unclaimed flyers, Lily turned to him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to." "I did," Ethan interrupted gently. "Because no one else would've." She smiled then, a real one that reached her eyes. It was soft, a little sad, but beautiful nonetheless. "You deserve better nights than this," he added. "So do you," she replied. They stood there for a moment longer, neither quite wanting to leave the safety of the small, strange connection they'd found in the middle of an indifferent city. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Lily." He watched her climb the stairs, wait for the click of her door lock, before he turned and made his way down the empty street. The walk home felt a little lighter. He realized, as dawn threatened the edge of the horizon, that it wasn't grand gestures or heroic acts that shaped a person. It was these small, quiet moments when you chose to care, when you stood between someone and harm, when you showed up even when no one else did. And in a world that often forgot how to be kind, maybe that was the most heroic thing of all.